Can't tell you how excited I am about the next 2 hours and 20 minutes. We have a lot of really exciting content about incrementality in ad effectiveness measurement. And I can't tell you also how excited I am about the turnout of this crowd. Today's Leadership Lab is really inspired by Rick Brenner's Leadership Lab earlier in the year that Paul referred to. And what Rick and us at Survata really agree on is that the research agenda in ad effectiveness measurement really needs to shift to focus primarily on how to overcome the feasibility issues to deliver on incremental ad effectiveness measurement. And so that's what all the content today is going to be about. So you showed up at the right place. And I think this turnout for today is really a good signal as to the interest in digital advertising around shifting our research agenda to focus exactly on incrementality and how to execute on it. So what I'm going to talk about today is incrementality, causal inference, why it's important. The fact that you're here today shows that you already understand this and why it's important. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. Then I'm going to talk about what are some of the feasibility issues around delivering on incrementality. And then, so what do we do given that? And here I'm going to talk both generally and specifically in brand lift measurement. So ad effectiveness measurement. In ad effectiveness measurement, we are looking for the key drivers of an outcome that's important to an advertiser. And to do this type of key driver analysis, to understand what channels and tactics are driving an outcome, we are in the good position of not having to come up with these models ourselves. In fact, social science has been working on this problem for decades. And so what we do in digital advertising over the last several years has been largely reusing models from social science, because social scientists in economics or in education, public policy, have a similar type of problem. They're trying to understand what are the key drivers behind outcomes in their domain, education outcomes, economic outcomes, health outcomes. And so Shapley regression is an example. We didn't invent Shapley regression in digital advertising. We reused it from social science and we're applying it. And that's largely where we get our methods. Now, these methods that we've largely been using are not causal, and Shapley regression being the central example. This is very simple example. Obviously, getting sunburns, it does not cause purchases of ice cream and vice versa. Now, that is where the similarity between social science implementations of these models and digital advertising implementation of these models ends. Because social scientists, when they present these studies, they present them with a large caveat where they highlight the limitations of these models, primarily that they are not causal. They will often point to some of the covariates that may be confounding the results that were not included in the study. And what is the big action item that generally comes at the end of these studies? It's to do more research. And so here's an example, is a study showing that having the light on at night might be a key driver of nearsightedness. And the takeaway was maybe use caution when having the light on at night, but this basically needs more study. And what do you know, when more study was done that was using more causal methods, we found out that in fact this is not a key driver of nearsightedness. Now, do we in digital advertising urge the same caution on our internal and external clients about acting based on these correlation-based models? I think it's safe to say that we do not, that we largely ignore the concerns about acting based on correlation-based models. And what that leads to is incentivizing bad behavior in our ecosystem. So now how does that really work? A lot of you already know this, but the way this really works is that we incentivize cookie bombing and we incentivize fraud because whenever we have a media partner that does any type of targeting, well, we have to provide them some type of an outcome. Pixel, some kind of an outcome so that they can measure and train and improve their targeting. Well, once we've provided them that outcome, which we have to do, then we've given them the data that they can then use to simply train a model of people who would have converted anyway. And our media partners largely know that our ad effectiveness models are based on correlation. And so they're very incentivized to target the people who would have converted anyway. This results in cookie bombing. Cookie bombing is then when you know someone has a very high propensity of converting anyway, you want to show ads to this person, whether they are viewable or not, on the cheapest possible inventory in order to have an ad exposure be associated with your media platform in a log that is used for ad effectiveness measurement. Because you don't really care about viewability, you simply care about your exposure showing up in a log, this incentivizes fraud, and obviously because you are focused more on quantity over quality, it undermines brand equity. The confession series that Digiday does, which I love, I think we all do, the most recent one, ad exec says between 50 and 75% of direct response display is cookie bombing driven by scamming of attribution models. So many of us know this. I have seen this firsthand in my career at other ad tech companies. And this is what leads to the interest in incrementality. So this is not something that's unknown. This is where the growing demand for incrementality comes from, and the reason why we have a sold-out crowd here today. Now, incrementality, causal inference. What is the gold standard of causal inference? It's clearly randomized controlled trials. However, in social science has known for decades that randomized controlled trials are not always possible. So they're not always feasible. You can't randomize schools and school districts. You can't randomize hospitals. You can't randomize states and decide which states you're going to have different minimum wages. Oftentimes, sample sizes are too small. Like with rare disease research, you obviously can't randomize which babies you're going to sleep on the front and back, and you can't randomize which kids you're going to send to college. So the reason why I want to bring this up is because at Survata, we think that the way causal inference research is viewed in digital advertising needs to be reframed just a little bit. Right now, in order to make a lot more progress. Right now, we generally view it as, we know we've got a problem with correlation-based models incentivizing bad behavior in the ecosystem. And we know that RCTs are the gold standard of causal inference. But we also know in digital advertising we have some feasibility issues, which I'll get to in a moment. But that's generally our mental model of the research agenda. Well, in fact, these feasibility issues we have are not specific to digital advertising. In fact, these feasibility issues are what drive research on causal inference. They are the research agenda for causal inference in the social sciences. And we should be leveraging that research, and we should be pushing that research forward. So what are our feasibility issues around RCTs in digital advertising? Well, RCTs are media platform specific. So what you would call the treatment assignment mechanism obviously is controlled by different media partners, different media platforms, so self-serve publishers, DSPs, social networks. So what that has a lot of consequences. You can't have a universal holdout. You can't identify the boost effects or the interaction effects between different channels, parsing out that interaction effect between different channels. And so what I'm showing here is the excellent ghost ads model that has taught us all so much as an industry and really pushed this conversation forward so much, but within different media partners. So now I'm going to talk about brand lift. So zoom this down into brand lift and what the history of methods for doing causal inference in brand lift look like. So in brand lift, our central challenge is that we are trying to measure the incremental impact. So we're focused on incrementality. The incremental impact of a campaign on a brand outcome. So an attitude towards a brand, favorability, consideration, message association. And we have an exposed and a non-exposed group. Well, the exposed group has pre-existing reasons why they're predisposed to have this attitude towards the brand. And so that's our central challenge in doing causal inference, doing incremental brand lift. Now, the first generation of approaches to measuring brand lift were basically to take a handful of confounding factors, of covariates. The key ones were age and gender. You might add in location, and you basically upweight and downweight the different buckets in which your non-exposed group falls into. Now, this worked in the first generation of digital brand campaigns, where the targeting of those campaigns were largely extensions of the targeting of your offline brand campaigns. So they were not digital first. And those targets were primarily age, gender, and location. But that clearly doesn't work anymore, because brand campaign targeting is now digital first and leverages several dimensions and user characteristics to the point where if you were to take this bucket-based weighting approach, many of your buckets would have 1 or 0 people in them. And you have to look at lots of covariates. Instead of having young men who regularly consume carbonated beverages. If you look at the segmentation studies that drive the most sophisticated brand campaigns for the largest brands, I mean, these are segments that are the result of sophisticated cluster analysis incorporating hundreds of user characteristics that is driving targeting. So in order to do causal inference, we need to account for lots of covariates, lots of confounding variables. We have to go way beyond age and gender to track extended demographics. We have to look at media consumption, which is an endogenous confounder. And this is critical. We have to look at the targeting characteristics that are specific to each study, each campaign. A lot of approaches to doing causal inference try to take a standard set of covariates and just apply those. And I've seen that done in a lot of causal inference studies in digital advertising, and I mean, that's just not going to work. In order to do this well, you always have to bring in human expertise, domain expertise, subject matter expertise. What is the targeting that's used in this particular study? And then you have to collect all this data. Now, once you have all of these covariates, then what do? Well, this is where we benefit from the fact that the issues around feasibility in RCTs have been known for decades, and so as a result, social scientists have been working on developing these methods for decades. So Imbens and Rubin and Pearl are probably the most well-known, but there's several others. And if you go to the ML and AI conferences every year, there's a larger and larger number of sessions focused on causality and causal ML. I mean, at this point, you just can't stay on top of the research anymore because there's new methods coming out literally every day. So what are these methods? Well, probably the one that has been used, I would say, the most in social science research has been propensity score matching, and that's where you take all of these covariates and you train a model of propensity to be exposed to the treatment. So in our case, propensity to be exposed to the ad, and then you weight based on that propensity score. Now again, that works a whole lot better when you have custom covariates in your propensity score model that are based on domain expertise, the specific targeting of a particular campaign. But there's a lot of other approaches that many of you are aware of. Synthetic controls. We actually combine synthetic controls and propensity score matching at Survata. And that gets to a broader theme, is that what we have found at Survata, and I think what you're going to hear from some of the speakers today, is that really the best approach in doing causal inference is to combine a lot of these methods, including RCTs. Because another limitation of RCTs in digital advertising that a lot of researchers have been pointing out is that even when you do an RCT, because the lift can be fairly small, you still have imbalanced groups. And so you still want to do some balancing. Well, these are propensity score matching and other approaches. Counterfactual analysis is how you can take a machine learning-based approach to balancing. So combining RCTs with these approaches or with an RCT is not possible, combining these approaches. And then there's a lot of exciting research around a more automated approach to this, where we can look at the heterogeneity in a lift across different channels and tactics, creative and media tactics, and make recommendations on an automated basis as to which of those tactics are driving lift. So that would be the research into causal trees by Susan Athey at Stanford, or a Bayesian approach by Jennifer Hill here at Columbia. There's so much exciting research that's going on into causal inference that it is our point of view at Survata that ad tech needs to be leading the way on this research and no longer being in the position that we've been in the past of simply reusing models that are largely out of date from social science. We have amazing data sets. And other sectors that have our data sets share those data sets with researchers. And that's how they push these methods forward. So key takeaways: causal inference is critical to understanding marketing effects and not just shoring up trust in our ecosystem by de-incentivizing bad behavior, but also realizing the benefits, the unique measurement benefits that you get from digital over non-digital campaigns. There are feasibility issues, but these feasibility issues are not specific to digital advertising. We need to be open and honest about them and realize that actually those feasibility issues have been the center of the research agenda around causal inference in the social sciences for decades. And we need to be learning from that research, and we need to be leading the way in that research and developing new methods.